Hi everyone. And so today I'm doing my homeschooling Q and A. I had gathered questions for the past couple weeks. I say weeks because I actually did this twice already. So I got the questions, I did a live, I recorded it. It didn't load to IG. This was, I think, when everything was failing. I did it again and it failed again. So twice, 2 hours worth of material was all gone. So I'm going to answer the questions I got. If you have any other questions, please just type them in. I'm going to try my best not to look at the bottom because otherwise I get so distracted that I lose my train of thought. But at the end, I will answer whatever other questions that you have that I can help you with. So this is my homeschooling Q and A. A little about me in case you don't know. I homeschooled my 3 kids from K through 12. I did not expect to homeschool that long, but I ended up doing it. All 3 of them have already gotten into college. They've graduated from college and they are all working and they're doing fine. They're well socialized. They're not weird. And so knowing that about me, I do have a lot of confidence in talking about homeschooling and all of the things I did, and I am happy to share it all. Now, whenever you talk to someone about homeschooling, you should also know what their particular goals are because it may not be congruent with yours. If you have different ideas for your family and what you think you may want for your children, then you really shouldn't listen to whoever doesn't kind of jive with that. For me, I am a huge supporter of trade schools. I don't think everybody has to go to college, but I wanted my kids to go to college. They absolutely had to go to college. That was a given for me. So that was a goal for the end of my homeschooling. I didn't really want them to be entrepreneurs or starting a business, although I would have loved that, but they were still going to go to college. Okay, so I also wanted to gain acceptance into very selective schools. That is what I wanted because, as you can tell, I'm Asian. There was a lot of people who were not supportive of me homeschooling, who also felt like I was taking away from my kids, who was withholding and depriving them of a lot of educational opportunities, which is what our parents came here for. And so I knew that if I didn't get them into a good school, people would be like, you see, you failed, you shouldn't have done that, you deprived your kids of all the things that they could do. And especially as they got older and they showed a lot of intelligence, there was that much more pressure on me because people knew that they were smart. So then why wouldn't I put them in school so that they could get all these opportunities? So I knew that at the end of my homeschooling, they had to have the same kind of opportunities, if not even more or better or something like that. So you have to keep that in mind. I had a lot of outside pressure and goals that I had to meet. So today I am not going to be talking about spiritual or mental goals or physical goals, although those things were very important. I am just referring to the academic things right now because that's what the questions are more about, like how to and the ins and outs of it. So that's what we're focusing on. Other kinds of benefits, the spiritual benefits, we can talk about that another time. So then you have to ask yourself, what are your goals? What are your academic goals for homeschooling? And why this is important is that it's going to determine how you choose curriculum, how you structure your day, the activities that you choose, just all of those kind of things. It's going to matter. So you have to have this idea of what you're trying to aim at, because if it's too broad, you're going to miss it, right? Or you're just always going to be thrown around like kind of the whole ship in a stormy sea, not quite sure. You're going to try all different kinds of curriculum. That's all going to matter. So what are your goals in homeschooling? Try to be specific as you can. Like for me, I said they had to get into good schools. I wanted my kids to go to college and major in something that was in high demand. So that also is going to structure the way that our homeschool is going to look like, meaning most likely it was going to be a lot of sciences, engineering, that kind of stuff, the things I struggled with the most. So that matters again, like the curriculum you're going to choose, what your goals are. I wanted them to be able to have a choice of jobs and opportunities when they graduated. I wanted them to be in high demand. I wanted them to be in a profession where they would always be able to easily secure a job that offered excellent benefits, because I live in the States, and as you know, medical care is very, very important. It is not acceptable to me for my children to not be able to easily obtain medical care. And so that again limits it, right? So that's important. I prefer literature-based. My background is actually in literature. I love books. There's so much more richness in an actual literature book rather than like a textbook. So that was important to me. I knew that I'd be able to teach out of it. It was just going to be, it's just so much more enjoyable. And I looked at a ton of curriculum, okay? Like, I'll tell you this, the one thing with me is I like research. Back then, there was not the internet. Like, when I started homeschooling, I didn't have the internet. So I had to figure things out with whatever I could cobble together, and from people's advice or whatever I could pick up, and then I had to order away, like for a mail order catalog, that kind of thing. But as they got older, I went to every single state homeschool fair that there was for several years so I could see things. I also would order a ton of stuff. I don't think I used maybe like half of what I used to order. I bought so much stuff, and then I would try it, and then I'd just sell it or give it away or something like that, because I was always searching for like that perfect curriculum, right? So I can tell you now what I ended up using. So the first question is, how do I start homeschooling with a 4th and 2nd grader? They are in school, and what do I do about that? So what do they think about homeschooling? Are they on board with it? Are they upset about it? Because this is going to matter, okay? Because obviously if they're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to come home, then it's gonna look a lot different than like, what? I'm not leaving my friends. What are you doing? This is crazy. So if they are not happy about homeschooling, you are going to have to spend time detoxing. You're going to have to spend time making it fun for them. Keep school minimal in the beginning and focus on showing them how they are going to have more time for the things that they love to do, and also spending time with friends. And you are going to have to find friends for them right away. So preparation is going to be key for you, because the first day that they're home, you should have everything laid out and just ready to jump into it. I think finding co-ops and support groups is very important, and that's like one of the first things that you should do so that it's ready before your kids are even home. So as soon as you get home, you can just plug them in. And why I think that's important is that they really need to meet other kids and make friends and see other like homeschool kids right away, so that they know that there's nothing weird with them. Because unless kids are somehow actively involved with other homeschoolers, like, it's just so bizarre to them, and it's hard to like figure this out, because everybody they know goes to school, and you're taking them away from their friends, and they don't understand what you're doing. So be prepared, be ready, keep school minimal and easy so that you're not overwhelming yourself or them. Keep to the basics, like just reading, writing, and arithmetic at the beginning, and they're going to need time to get to understand the lingo and understand just how homeschooling works. And that's fine. It's like, you know, there's a learning curve to everything. How do you organize a homeschool area for a mom with ADHD? ADHD is different for everybody and how it manifests. So first, you're going to have to know your triggers. You're going to have to know what distracts you, what happens when you get distracted. My biggest thing is declutter and minimize everything, okay, and focus. So if you need to have like a dedicated homeschool room, do what you have to do to make sure it is easier for you to maintain. You don't need to put up stuff all over the walls. You don't need to decorate it like school. You don't have to put stuff everywhere, because that makes it harder for me to focus anyway. I don't have ADHD, but I get distracted all the time. And then make master lists of what you need to do before you leave that room. And you might have to put that on the wall, so you have to do this subject, that subject, this subject. Keep your phone out of the room and focus just on getting school done when you are in that room, and just get yourself into the habit of that. It's a lot like how I work with kids who have ADHD. It's about routine and rhythms and just things to make it automatic for them to like put their bag down in this corner over and over and over again, and just practice that way. How do I get, so then two-part question, 2 people asked this question, how do I get started? I asked my school district and they told me that they don't support homeschooling. And then someone else asked, is it hard dealing with the state? Is it overwhelming and challenging? So one, it doesn't matter if your school district does not support homeschooling. They have no say in what it is that you do, which is good, because I don't want them in my life. And so you have to look up the laws of your state. HSLDA usually has it very accurate. Go on their website and see what the laws are. In PA, where I live, we have some of the strictest homeschool laws. And what that means is that at the beginning of the year, I have to file an affidavit, say I'm homeschooling them, that I'm going to do all these subjects. And then I also submit like a short, brief curriculum list of what we're going to be following or learning, even though we don't have to do that plan at all. And then I submit it, and then I keep a portfolio throughout the year, and I hire a homeschool evaluator at the end, which is usually like another homeschool mom. My friend does it. And she just writes up like a form that says that I attest that adequate education has taken place. And then I just submit that to the district, and then it's done, and I don't see them again. Now, So is it hard dealing with the state? Overwhelming? Yes and no. I mean, it depends how hard you want to make it or how hard the individual district is with you. I've never had a problem. They've been always very respectful toward me. They've never given me an issue. So I didn't care. But other states are usually more lenient. Like I homeschooled in Virginia, and back then, so this was 20 some years ago, it was just file an affidavit at the beginning of the year, and all I did was like check a couple things off and then I submit that. Maryland was a little bit more harder. It was like a supervisor had to check your portfolio every 6 months, I think. I didn't finish that. New Jersey was the easiest. New Jersey, they didn't care about you. I mean, you just didn't send your kid to school. They didn't have you file anything. They didn't check anything. I mean, it was crazy considering how many laws and how restrictive that state is on so many things with homeschooling. It's like if you decide to homeschool, then you just didn't exist to them, and that was the end of that. So it really depends where you live and what your district is like, but you should know your laws and you should know your rights, okay, before you interact with them so that you don't give them too much information. So then, and how do I get started homeschooling? When you get started homeschooling, and this really depends upon the age of your children, but I'm going to say this, okay? Don't make it overwhelming for yourself. You are not going in like teaching every single subject down to language, like foreign language and everything. Like it shouldn't be like that. Unless you start with an older child, then that's a whole nother story. But in the beginning, especially when they're little, focus on the reading, writing, and arithmetic. Those are the three most vital subjects, and everything else will build on that. Because if you cannot read, you cannot do science or history, right? If you can't do math, then you can't do science. That's just how it goes. And so reading, writing, and arithmetic, make sure they're reading, do some writing, and do a math lesson all the time. And I always had 2 math books going in the earlier ages. I had Sachs. So what I've done, Singapore, Maikwon, Math UC, Abeka Math, BJU Math, and I'm sure a couple others. Okay, I can't remember it. I know I did. So what I ended up doing was a combination of Saxon and Horizons. Very traditional math. Each lesson just wasn't long enough in my opinion, and so my kids would just do the math, like one lesson in Saxon, one lesson in Horizons, and they just kept doing that up until they got to pre-algebra. And that worked for us, and literally they could do math in 30 minutes, not even. So focus on the reading, writing, and arithmetic, and then as you get into the rhythm of it, you can start adding other subjects. You can start adding a history book, you can start adding a science book. And I think that that's just the best way to go. Focus on a couple things. You have to remember that as much as you think that they do so much in school because they're gone all the time and gone all day long, there really is not that much covered. I mean, surely, especially after COVID and you bring your kids home, you can see how much busy work there is, how much just administrative work there is. The actual learning of material, it's very, very little. So you are going to do fine. Take it slow, get the basics down, and then keep adding to it. How do you get a child interested in school at home? And then how do you help kids build good habits? And how do you motivate them? So I'm going to tell you that you really can't get your child interested in at school. It comes down to self-motivation, and it comes down to how you go about trying to instill self-motivation in them. And usually it's some kind of reward system. And usually they have to see what purpose this education has in their life. And they have to do school at home. And so the question also is how to set expectations of doing school even though they're at home. They're doing school. There's nothing else to do. And this is just a part of life. Like everyone gets educated. You are blessed enough to be educated and you are going to learn. And it's just like a family atmosphere and aura. There should be no games. If they were to like try to sneak off and do play games, like video games or something, like that stuff would be out the door so fast, or it needs to get locked up. Because I know that if I don't have the energy to constantly monitor and I see them getting distracted, then remove whatever it is distracting them. And how do you get them interested in school at home? This is just them understanding that this is for their future. Okay, like what do they want to be? Do they want to have money? And I also, I say this, but you have to understand that there was a lot behind it. And so I didn't give my kids allowance, and that was just a long process of how I figured all this stuff out. I ended up not giving my kids allowance, but rather I would buy them very nice things. as they got older, it was like huge Lego sets, like the $100+ Lego sets. As they got older, an iPad or an airsoft gun or whatever it was, those things came as they worked hard. Because when you work hard, you earn money, and money gets you the things you want. So if you don't work hard, you get no money, and you do not get the things you want. And so that's like a path that you have to kind of build for your kids and teach them that way, because they have to understand that this ability to work and to earn money, because that's what an education is supposed to get for you, right? Like distilling it down, the education is so that you can get a skill so that you can survive in this world. Obviously, if you're enjoying and thinking and philosophy and all that kind of stuff, is wonderful. But the core of it is so that they are intelligent enough and they are skilled enough to be able to get a job so they can earn a living for themselves. That's what I focused on when they were younger. That this is for you when you grow up as an adult. What kind of home do you want to buy? What kind of car do you want? Well, that stuff is going to take work. And so that's how I would motivate them. And that's how I also set expectations, like school is school, it's getting done. How do I homeschool 4 kids with curriculum and activities? So I have 3 children, and they are close in age, so I understand it was different for me because my daughter is 22 months older than my twin boys, and then obviously my twins are the same age. So I was able to kind of keep them together much more easier than if I had like a 6, 7, 8-year age gap. So with 4 kids, let's say that every 2 years, so you have like an 8-year age gap. What I would do, it's just going to be a lot more work for you. There's just no way around that. It's not going to be easy. But the curriculum that I would use is Tapestry of Grace. I used Sunlight as my core up until my kids were around like 7th, 8th grade, and then I moved over to Tapestry of Grace. That is because Sunlight, I bought every single core. That's what it was called back then. It was like their base box, the base of the core of the curriculum, and then things built on it. But it was all books. It was a teacher's guide. I thought it was great. The books were our favorite. The choosings that they had, these were like all major like Newbery Award winners and stuff, so you can find it. But I chose to buy it from them, 1, to support the company, and 2, because to save my own sanity. I wasn't about to go around. Plus, I ended up saving a lot of the books or selling them. And my children's most favorite books all came from our Sunlight cores, and I still have the ones that they once saved up on top there. The rest of them I got rid of. And so, but then when you move over to Tapestry of Grace, what it is like they give you 3 levels. So let's say that they are studying Egyptian history. Like the oldest one will be studying maybe the philosophy of Egyptian history. The middle one will be just studying Egyptian history and learning about Pharaoh or whatever. And then the youngest one will be making like a salt map or building a pyramid. And yet they're still studying the same subject. You do some things together, teaching to the oldest, and then you can just go in a little bit more deeper with as they get older. And that's what I would probably do. It is a lot more work on the parent, but you have to remember, it's a lot more work like keeping your kids together and doing that rather than separating them out and then just having them do a box curriculum. But that's not my thing. Like I had shared before, I'm not into box curriculum. So like being able to sit together as a family and to talk and discuss, that was very, very important to me. That was one of the reasons why I homeschooled. So I wasn't about to give that up. So Tapestry of Grace, activities is going to be hard because obviously you're going to have older kids that can do a lot, younger kids who can't, and it's not going to match up. And so that's just going to take juggling. Homeschooling is great in that they are aware of these things. And so when there are co-ops or activities, they try to cater to a lot more ages, but then your kids are just going to have different interests and abilities as they grow older. And maybe like hiring help or, getting family to help you drive around. Any Christian-based curriculum with things like home ec, not that I know of, I'm sure it's out there, but the extracurricular kind of stuff like home ec or shop or car mechanics, some people do, those are just best done on your own. I can't, like these days, especially with YouTube, depending what skill you want to use, I feel like you can teach yourself. And it's nothing that's important enough that where you need to document it for a school official or for college. So it should really be something that you just enjoy. So I don't think you need a curriculum. Rather, what I would do is just make a list of all the skills that you want your child to learn, maybe by a certain age. Or in high school, I actually had a list of the skills that I wanted them to learn by the time they graduated high school or left my house, right? and they weren't home for me to do these things, and work toward those things. Each year have a couple goals and say, like, how am I going to get there? If you want your child to be able to shop for and prepare an entire family dinner, what does that look like? What steps are you going to take? Do you take them food shopping? Maybe you just decide to just take food shopping one kid so that you can focus on them. But that's just best done, I think, by you. You don't need to buy any kind of curriculum for that. And so therefore, I don't know of one. I'm not saying there's not one, but I don't know of it. And what do you take into consideration when deciding curriculum? What is your recommended curriculum, particularly when teaching a 6-year-old how to read? I made a YouTube video on how to teach your child to read. Teach your child to read in 100 easy lessons. That is the best book ever. So I use that to teach my 3 kids how to read. 9 of my nieces and nephews all learned how to read using that book. Teach your child to read in 100 easy lessons. That's the name of the book. If you Google it or go into Amazon, the book is literally less than $20. You could probably find it on eBay for even cheaper. Between that and the library, you will be able to teach your child how to read. It is an amazing program, and it just changed my life, because when I decided to homeschool, like the whole thing of how am I going to teach them how to read, that was like the first and foremost thing I thought about, because I feel like reading is so important. If you don't know how to read, you cannot teach anything else, right? Like reading, you unlock the entire written world, and if not even more, for your child. So I did not want to mess that up. But that book, Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, is amazing. What do I take into consideration when deciding curriculum? I liked Christian curriculum using secular type of materials. So all the Newbery Award-winning books, those are the kind of things. I did not want a box curriculum, and which goes to, would you recommend a good homeschool curriculum? I have friends who use Abeka, but I don't know if it's too old school. That's the kind of stuff I stayed away from. And yes, I did look at Abeka. I looked through all their stuff. I used their language arts book for 1 year, and I used their math program, I think, for 1 year. I know I used math and language arts, maybe even for 2 years. Again, concurrently with other stuff. I like the worksheets. I think with the LA, it was the worksheets was good. But why I would not use something like Abeka or Bob Jones, and yes, I am a Christian, and yes, leading my children to the faith was it was like the top priority of why I decided to homeschool. And so one of the things I wanted them to experience while they were home is a continual wrestling and a grappling with their Christian faith, because it's going to happen sooner or later. And I had no desire to like whitewash everything and be like, well, of course God is real, which he is, but you know what I mean, right? Like I wanted them to learn evolution. I wanted them to learn these things while they were at home so they could grapple with it and we could talk about it. Like, and I have no idea why like anybody would buy a book like Abeka or BJU where they write all their own stuff and it's so rigid. And I'm just like, this is so corny. Like, I don't know how else to put it. The books are just so corny, like the readers and stuff like that. Like, you know, I'm making this up. Like, Benny and Bobby walked to school and they found a wallet. What do we do? And I'm just like, dude, like, this is not real life, okay? Like, kids don't act like that. And it just feels so fake to me. And I know that people think like whatever you put into their mind that this is going to be them, but we know that's not true, okay? Like, and then the thing with Abeka that I don't like is, one, they were not supportive of homeschoolers in the very beginning, and they only opened up their curriculum to sales to homeschoolers when they realized the money that was involved. So that alone is like a no. And then two, I looked it up, and yes, they still use those videos that are taking a video of a teacher teaching a class. So all the kids see, like, your child will see the back of the head of all these kids. It's like, it's weird. It's like they are outside looking in, right? They're not a part of the class. And so why would I want that? Like, why do I need to make it already hard enough for me as it is? Because, you know, homeschooling was not as common when my kids were younger, and we lived in a neighborhood filled with kids that didn't homeschool, and we talked about school, like, why would you go to school? And the last thing I needed for my kids to do is look in on a video, like be taught by a video of like kids in a classroom, right? Then like, what am I saying? That that's the superior way? No, it's not. What we're doing is better. And so I don't like Abeka. Like, they write all their own books. There's like no outside opinions, nothing worthwhile reading, in my opinion. So that's just how I feel. Take my 2 cents for what it's worth. I've never been a supporter of them. So what do I take into consideration when deciding curriculum? Of course, I want a Christian worldview of the secular materials out there. Okay. And that's another thing. I think it was like Abeka, or those like the hardcore Christian stuff. Is like they didn't teach Greek mythology, which I'm like, one, I have a literature background, and I was just thinking, like, how could you not teach Greek mythology? Okay. Only because of the cultural literacy factor. So what? Like when you say like, oh, that's like a Herculean task, which is your kid going to know what that means? Or like they got an Achilles heel. Are they going to know what that means? Okay. Or like if they, that the love of your life is like a siren song or something like that. They don't know what that means. Why would you do that to your kids? Okay. Greek mythology is in the core, just like scripture. It is into like the essence of our culture and our history and things we've learned. And like Christian curriculum that doesn't teach that, I have no idea why. Okay. They're not going to believe it. In my opinion, just because you teach them Greek mythology, they're not going to be like, this is the way. If anything, I love it because we had so many discussions of how these Greek gods were so different from Christ. Why would you not want those kind of discussions with your kids? And so Sunlight had a Greek mythology book, and I'll tell you, all three of my kids loved Greek mythology, and they are still devout believers, okay? But they know that stuff. And so that was important to me, which is secular materials from a Christian world view. And with math, I looked at I wanted things taught in a standard Americanized way. I wasn't going to do like Common Core or anything like that. I wanted to look familiar to me in terms of addition, subtraction, how to go about that, a lot of memorization. And so that's what we did. That's how I picked things out. And they also had to get to the AP SAT level with all that. So I based it on how it would fit those goals. I'm also a therapist who homeschools. How do you find time and balance both? I didn't. I worked part-time as a children and youth pastor when my kids were little, and for about 10 years total when I was parenting. So we could always attend as a family. So my kids were always with me, and then they would just run around, play with friends, or do things. So I wasn't really, it was like a part of our life. But once my oldest started high school, I retired from ministry. Because I knew I owed her my focus, and I was not going to be able to focus on anything else other than high school. I needed to be able to get her to all her activities and make sure that she had a rich life, because I wasn't homeschooling to diminish her life in any way. I was trying to make sure it was richer and better than what public school could have offered her. What was literally the hardest part of homeschooling? The hardest part is going to be different for everybody. And so you can ask every single person, and you're going to get a different answer. For me, it was the constancy and not having time away from my kids, handling the continual conflict that just occurs when people are together. As you know, you are going to bicker with your kids, and there's going to be problems. So the relationship handling and growing with my kids and just being there with them all the time as they go through every single stage, every single minute of the day, it's hard. It was very emotionally taxing for me. And everything about their life rested on my shoulders. And it was my responsibility. And if I messed up or my kids weren't happy with something, it was going to be my fault. And that I took very seriously, and it was a burden. Because like I said, trying to provide for them a rich, like an overall rich life, it was hard. Friends, activities, sports. I mean, like I had a list of all the different kinds of things I wanted them to try. Even though in public school, I don't think you would have had that kind of opportunity, like gymnastics. I wanted them to do choir and play instruments, and they learned how to play chess. They didn't have to do like the best of everything, but I wanted them to have experiences like that. And I also wanted them to have a lot of social opportunities, and that's very important. And so that was just the pressure and the burden was really hard for me. How do you handle specials like art, music, gym, foreign language? I outsourced as much as I could when it came to that stuff. Always keep the academics and the most important subjects at home, and you keep control of that. Do not ever pass it off to anybody, because one day you're going to look up and you're going to be like, they learned nothing or they did nothing. That always happens. And so core subjects, important subjects was always done at home. And even as they get older, let me make this clear, as they get more independent, which is one of the goals that everybody should have, especially by the time they're in high school, they should grow more independent with their work. Still keep the final control, which is like, as I've shared in other places, I'm terrible at math. I failed Algebra 1 2 times. I failed the first time. The second time, the teacher just gave me a D to get me through. I had no idea what I was doing when it came to math, but I still graded all of my children's work. Okay, I still graded it all, and I kept on top of it, because this also keeps your authority in their mind that you are the parent, rather than like handing everything off and then after all you have no idea what they're talking about, and then they ask you a question, you're like, huh? It just diminishes you in their eyes. And so for me, I always kept the final authority. I always kept also the ability to be able to change things around. If I could look at a subject, like an activity or an assignment, and I knew that it was fruitless for them, I would just say, we don't have to do that. Just things like that. But the art, music, and gym, that can all be done outside. Co-ops, find lots of friend groups, find activity groups. Back then, we had Yahoo groups. Okay, so I was on the Yahoo groups for everywhere around here. I'm sure that now there are Facebook groups, but I'm not a part of any Facebook homeschool groups because I'm not homeschooling anymore. But there should be stuff going around. If there isn't, it's really sad. But back then, there was like a field trip group, and once a month they would organize a field trip, and we would do that. Obviously, with music, I would hire music teachers, and they took lessons, and then we were part of a really awesome choir for a few years. Art, whatever special kind of art there was, so I had them take painting once. We have like an art center here, and I would just pay the money and they just go to class. And once my daughter wanted to learn pottery, I think that was like the last big thing, and so she took a pottery class for 12 weeks at the art center, and they fired and kiln dried, all that kind of stuff, and we wouldn't be able to do that at home. The way I figure it is, for those kind of fun things, let somebody who can take care of it, and me not stress out at home trying to get all that stuff together, let someone else take care of it. Foreign language is the one thing where I will have to say that I do think it's best done with an excellent teacher or tutor in person. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to teach foreign language, so I started searching for a tutor maybe like 2 years before they started. And again, I was fortunate enough that I could put my kids together. And that is because I don't know the foreign language at all, and I felt like there is something to be had for the speaking part of it and the communication part and the instant questions. And so that's why I found a tutor. We drove every week for 6 years up to another town, 30 minutes one way, every single week, over and over. But I kept my kids at the same level because they were the same years. My daughter could have probably started a year or two sooner than my sons, and my sons probably could have waited a year, but I just put them together and we were just committed and we just kept going. And so that's what I did with the foreign language. She was awesome. And even with her, I had goals, okay? Even with her, I had goals. I said, by the time they're done, I need them to be able to take the SAT Latin exam and to do well, which they did. They did so well that they were able to place out of all the language requirements at their respective universities. All right, so what curriculum do you like for a preschooler, especially a gifted learner who needs more? That is Sunlight. I think it's awesome for a young child. You're gonna have you're just going to have such a great time reading with your child. The number one thing I always tell parents to do is to read with your child. When all else fails, read out loud. You teach them so much just by reading out loud. There's so much discussion, there's so much learning. Their ear picks up the written words, so they learn how things should sound, like sentences, and how an author will put things together and express their ideas. And so for a preschooler, start with the Sunlight. I don't know what level you would want to get because I don't know how old your child is, and just keep going. And just because it says like it's year one, it doesn't mean you have to be in first grade. You can start it in kindergarten. And if you end up going through Sunlight kindergarten, let's say so fast, and you finish in like 3 months, then just buy the next level and just keep going. And that's what we did. And I finished all the Sunlight course all the way through the high school level. By the time my kids were, I guess like 8th grade, my oldest was in 8th grade, we were done with the Sunlight. So then that's when we moved over to the Tapestry of Grace. And so how would you even start? If you are talking about a young child who's never been in school, start teaching them how to read. Start teaching them how to read and start amassing books for them to read, and the reading, writing, and arithmetic. Writing at that age would just be copy work. find a good piece of literature and just start having them copy, do the alphabet, maybe just a couple sentences, and start on memorizing math facts, because when they are young, they will just absorb that stuff like a dry sponge to water. And you have to take advantage of those early years. Okay, you have to take advantage of all that amazing ability that they have when they're young to memorize. And that's what you would do. Just math facts, teaching them all kinds of things. In fact, I did a YouTube video on homeschooling preschool and the things that I did and what I would do different. And that's one of the things I said, is to just make yourself all these kind of flashcards using index cards and Crayola markers. Mix all kind of flashcards and just start. And if they are a gifted preschool, like, they'll be learning how to read really fast. And so, how do you keep your children socialized? I think I even saw a question about that. So, how did you do homeschooling and also work as a therapist? I have to get my master's in counseling, but I had already answered that question, and I said I did not work outside the home like that. I worked part-time as a children's pastor for about 10 years throughout, like, just jaggedly while I was a mom, but there's no way I would have been able to work. I was not able to do that. So, does homeschooling affect children socially making friends? And then the other question I had about, how do you keep your children socialized? So that's the biggest question people have, right? How do you keep your children socialized? Are they going to be weird? How will they know how to talk to people? And I will have to say that all of it is unfounded. Why? Because now as a therapist, I work with lots of kids who are not homeschooled, and guess what they struggle with? Socializing. Okay, and I find it so funny at times that now as a homeschooler, I talk about socializing all the time. I teach people how to socialize. I teach adults how to socialize. And so, first it's about, like, what is your idea of socialization? What does that mean for you? So what it means for me is that, and I had, again, goals. I had ideas of what it is I wanted my children to look at. I wanted them to be in power of their socializing. I did not want them to be one of those kids who are always waiting quietly for an invitation, because that might not come. I wanted them to be bold. I wanted them to be able to reach out to people and introduce themselves, to be okay with the awkwardness and the self-consciousness of being new, of not, I mean, it's always going to be there, but to be able to overcome the awkwardness of being like, hi, my name is Ruth, right? Going up to a stranger and talking to them and learning how to make friends and how to listen and how to be a good friend. And then, like, the other thing for me that was very important is, as you can see, I'm Asian, and it's not as much now. I mean, it's just definitely not. I feel like the whole world has changed in terms of its acceptance of Asian culture. But growing up, the stereotypical Asian was someone who was quiet, nerdy, and mousy. And I said, that is not going to be my kids. And my daughter is also, I would have to say, if I had just let it go, she has a tendency to be more on the shyer side and just be quiet. And as I helped her work through that, this is, even if a person is shy and introverted, which is great, at the same time as they still need to be in control, so that if they want to be able to go out to an event, they should have the courage to be able to do it. And they should be invited to places, and they should feel wanted, because that's the other big thing, right? Is that you want that invitation. You want that knowledge that people want you around and that they remember you when they're drawing up a party list. You don't want to, like, be in your room crying because they forgot about you and didn't invite you. And that's huge for kids. And that's one of the things where I said, that's not going to happen to my kids. So what does that mean? They have to be more of like a leadership type of kid, whether they have it within them or not. And so having those kind of goals all listed out is hugely beneficial. Having an idea of what it may look like, and then teaching them. So how do I keep them socialized? We always, and it's funny because I think I made a reel saying that, is to always make sure that your kid had two social groups, two different social circles. Because if one of them kind of blow up, they always have the other one. And it also helps them to just get a different perspective, because you know how, like, if you just have one best friend and it's just them, then how they think about you, if they've called you or not, if they've invited you, it just matters so much more. And I just didn't want that for them. So I always made sure they had several different social circles. And how I did that was co-ops. We always concurrently had two co-ops going. And And it's funny now because I see that I thought it was a huge benefit. One, they had to get used to introducing them to people, to themselves, to new kids all the time. And then if one co-op fell apart for whatever reason, which a couple times it has, once we moved and other times we just stopped joining and stuff, they always had another friend group going. Plus, it just broadens their social circle. Like growing up, my kids just knew almost every homeschooler in the area. We went to that choir I mentioned. It was in Delaware. I live in the tri-state Philadelphia area. And so, 30 minutes we could be in South Jersey, 30 minutes we could be in Delaware and up in PA and like all around. So when we lived in Jersey, we were in a co-op there, a really big co-op with like 300 kids. And even after we moved, we continued in that co-op for a year. So we just kept driving back and we still had friends over there and we would still see them. But at the same time, while we were in PA, we started another co-op so that they did both. So that by the time that their PA roots became stronger, we could just go here and then leave the New Jersey friends and say goodbye in a happy way. And then they had their choir in Delaware. So then we met all the homeschoolers over there. We've I think participated in like 3 or 4 different co-ops here, and we did sports here. And then they had their own volleyball team once they got older. And then we started inviting. One of the things I did that was great for them is that in junior and senior year, the last year and a half of my boys' high school, I let them organize their own little volleyball team so that they could compete and do whatever they wanted. And one of the things they wanted was they would invite all the other teams that they had met at matches. Like we have these big homeschool tournaments, and they would meet kids, but then there was never any time to socialize because it was only at the tournaments. So what we did was when I organized this team, I would always rent out gym time, which was cheaper because we were homeschooled, so it would be during the day. So the gym I found, they were willing to work with me with really good pricing. And then we could invite all of these other teams to scrimmage because we were in control of, and we were in charge of it. So they would just have fun. Afterwards, we'd go over to the mall, we would eat together, and it was just a really fun time. And those are the kind of things that you have to come up with. Those are the kind of ideas you're going to have. When they're young, you're going to have a lot of play dates. I had regular play dates. I always let their friends come over, usually after co-op. I would always let them invite a friend over. Their friend would come, eat, play. Then I'd take them home. Play dates all the time, activities all the time, to the point where we were usually out 4 to 5 days a week. Then one day at home, and then the other day was at church. So that's how you keep them socialized. This is where it is really important, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not able to work outside of the home and homeschool, because it was very, very important to me. It was important to me, and as long as my kids got their work done, I always said yes to whatever activity, and I drove them all over the place. And it was important to me because it just enriched their life, and as they get to be teenagers, social circles are so important, because this is how, as they get older, they like look at each other and they kind of assess themselves, and they're like, okay, well, she's smarter, I'm not as smart, but I'm this, I'm taller, I'm athletic, and like that's just what kids do. If they don't have that ability to kind of measure themselves against other peers, they get very self-conscious. And it's funny because every time I do talk with like a group of homeschool kids, many times they will ask me like, how do you think I could meet more kids? Like, we want more kids here. I want to do more stuff. And so as a parent, you're going to have to look for those things. I do not think that just doing church is enough. A lot of homeschoolers will say, well, we went to church all the time, we were part. No, you need to expand their circle outside of that. Okay, you need to meet people, you need to get them out, get them doing stuff, volunteer, just push them out more and more and more. Then they come home and you can process things with them, you can talk with them, they have gone through those things, they've practiced social skills, they've practiced talking to strangers, and so that is what I did. And I'm fortunate because of where I live. There's a lot of stuff to choose from, but it all did take driving. Nothing was easy or like right around the block like it would have been if I just took them to school. Just about every single activity or group was at least 20 minutes away, one way. And then in one of our co-ops toward the end, they were all out at least about a 30-minute drive. And as they had to get together with their friends, I would have to drive them out there. But I did it because they have awesome friends. And that's another thing I would say, that when your children have really nice friends, do everything you can to encourage those friendships, because those friendships will last. And then if they develop friends that you don't approve of as much, don't tell them that, but you're just kind of like, you get a bad vibe because they have all their other friends and you're always taking them to see their friends. It's not a big deal if they're like, all right, I won't hang around with them. So it helps with that. All right, I think I got to every single question. Yes, I do have a YouTube channel. I'm trying to build that, and I should be putting more stuff on there, especially after IG just completely lost all my stuff. Is there any other question? If not, feel free to DM me if you have anything else. I believe in the power of homeschooling. Homeschooling has been amazing for my family. It was really hard throughout. It wasn't perfect, of course. But now that I'm on the other side and I see the incredible benefits my family and my children and myself have experienced, I am a huge advocate for school choice. I love homeschooling, and if there's anything I can ever do to help you or to answer a question, feel free to reach out. Okay? Bye.